engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.
Hello and welcome to Engage for Success Radio and show number 591 in the weekly series. Engage for Success is a not-for-profit movement and the UK's leading voice on the topic of employee engagement. We are out there raising awareness and running events through our area networks right across the country. And our topic and sector-specific thought and action groups are developing research, publishing case studies, and highlighting all the best practice that's going on out there. Now, if you want to find out more, please visit engageforsuccess.org. And while you're there, why not sign up for our weekly newsletter, ensuring you never miss out on any of our excellent free resources, events, and updates. And I'm Andy Gorham, your host for today's show and the founder of BizJuicer, the employee engagement and culture change consultancy that helps growing organizations become stickier from the inside by helping them attract, keep, and develop great people. Now then, today, we're looking at something that I reckon quite a few leaders see as a tricky balancing act, hitting big performance goals without sacrificing a great workplace culture. Now, what if there is, though, a simple, repeatable, scalable process that can actually help you do both anyway? Well, my guest today, Matt Tenney, believes there absolutely is. Matt is the author of 3 leadership books, including Inspire Greatness: How to Motivate Employees with a Simple, Repeatable, Scalable Process. His TED Talk on the subject has been viewed over 1 million times, and since 2014, he's been helping organizations like Salesforce, L'Oreal, United Airlines, and Keller Williams develop world-class leaders who boost engagement, retention, and performance. So, today, we're going to explore just how leaders can use a people-first approach to fuel performance, not fight against it. Matt, welcome to the show, my friend. It's absolutely brilliant to have you with us.
Thank you, Andy. It's wonderful to be here. I've enjoyed all of our chats up to this point, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
Me too. The reins are off. We have 30 minutes to have a good old chin wag about this topic.
All right, let's do it.
I mean, Inspire Greatness, that is just a wonderful title for anything, really. Certainly gets my juices flowing. I'm interested to find out, though, if we look at your own journey, just to start with, get a bit of a flavor for you. What's inspired this passion for helping leaders see that you can both improve performance and maintain and drive culture at the same time? What's behind all of that?
Well, I actually lived and trained as a monk for a number of years, and the core motivating factor, in fact, a vow that you take, is to help all people to be free from their suffering. And as I thought about when I decided that I wasn't going to be a monk for my entire life, I thought about, well, how can I bring this to life in the real world, so to speak, in the quote unquote real world. And I realized that, obviously, ultimately, what makes the biggest impact on society is individuals. So, if you want to have a peaceful society, you need peaceful human beings, right, in that society. And that's kind of
Yeah.
the core of the monastic path. But I think there's also skillful means that can speed up the process. And part of that is just how organizations are run. And if organizations are having a positive impact on the growth and well-being of the people in those organizations, I believe that has a huge impact on society. If people go home and all their conversations are about how stressed out they are and how much their boss is toxic, I mean, that's just bleeding over into every aspect of their lives. And it affects their family members, it affects their neighbors, and ultimately the community that they live in. And I think the converse is also true. If organizations are creating environments where people are thriving, where they're growing, where they're actually becoming not only better professionals, but better human beings, that has a positive ripple effect throughout society. And so, my thought is, look, we have a short time on this planet. If we got to do something to earn a living, I want to do something awesome. And I would like to create the conditions for a planet where unnecessary suffering like poverty and violence go away. And I think a huge part of making that happen is creating organizations where there is not this false dichotomy that we have to choose between performance and having a positive impact on people. In fact, the two actually are synergistic and fuel each other.
I totally concur with that. I totally concur with that. And that's why I'm looking forward to hearing your perspective on this topic. Already, though, I'm already hooked. I'm speaking to somebody who was a monk. And, for me, if I think about today's topic and also the larger topic of culture and impact on the workforce, and I just love the fact that you've just talked about the impact that work has on our home lives too. The two are so heavily combined. I think the link between service of others, commitment, and impact for good and social conscience, I think they are three huge bullet points for the world of work today. I think if we all rallied around these points, I think work would feel a lot better in the first place. I am really interested because of the amount of time, I say the small amount of time that we have to talk today, to think about this, or the lessons that you bring forward in Inspire Greatness, particularly this core idea behind having a simple, repeatable, scalable process to performance and culture. I mean, maybe there's a performance management piece in the middle that kind of gels these things together, but can you take us through the kind of core elements of this? I'm going to use the word tenet that you have within the book that would help us understand your perspective of this and how this all works together.
Sure. Yeah, it's I actually propose that it's an algorithm.
Okay.
That I think leadership and culture tend to be thought of as kind of these fuzzy things that it's there's all these different opinions, like, oh, this leadership style is better, oh, that leadership style is better, and I think you could make a good case that different leadership styles are appropriate in different situations, right?
Of course.
But I do think that there is an algorithm, a repeatable process that is scalable for consistently bringing out the best in team members. And I would humbly suggest that that is more important than strategy, because obviously strategy is important, right? If you don't have an effective strategy, it's pretty hard to be successful in the marketplace. However, even if you have an excellent strategy, if you can't inspire people to execute the strategy, then the strategy is of little value. It won't be executed, right? So I think even if you have P&L responsibility and you are in charge of the overall strategy of an organization, I would humbly suggest that your primary job is to inspire greatness in the people that are going to be executing that strategy, right? So that's the first step in the process, actually, is I think we need to be reminded of that frequently. So it's a 4-step process, this algorithm, that's pretty simple. I'll go over it briefly, and then we can just go deeper wherever you want to.
Yeah.
But the first step is that we need to be frequently reminded that our true job is, in fact, if we are a leader of people, regardless of what our job description reads, our primary job is to inspire greatness in the people we lead. And I've never met anyone that argues with that. I mean, it's so common sense, it almost sounds trite, right? But the question is, how often do we operate like that? And I think if we're honest, and it's not our own fault, it's due to pressures from the outside, it's due to habits that we've created. We very rarely operate in that mode. We're often operating in react mode, in accomplishing, focusing on short-term numbers mode. Yep. And we don't spend enough time doing the things that inspire greatness in the people that we lead. And so we need to make this shift from being a boss to being a coach. And I think that's really the core move of this first step, is as we continually remind ourselves that our primary job is to inspire greatness in others, we start to make this shift to spending more and more time coaching and developing, and less time acting as though we're a glorified individual contributor with some extra responsibilities, right? We shouldn't, the more senior we get, the less stuff we should be doing, and the more we should be bringing out the best in the people who are doing stuff, right? So that's step one. So step two kind of flows naturally from that. If we start operating more and more from that position of seeing ourselves, our primary job is to inspire greatness in our team by serving as a coach who helps people to thrive. And my definition of that is to help people be happy, good human beings who do excellent work, do great work, right? So if we remind ourselves of that frequently, we start to be a little bit more resilient to the pressures that compel us to focus on short-term numbers, to go spend 3 hours in email when we could be spending 2.5 of those hours coaching and developing people, so on and so forth. we become more resilient to the pressures and the habits, and we start to think more about and take micro actions along the lines of coaching others. But the other thing that happens is it begs a question. If my primary job is to bring out the best in others, to inspire greatness, well, I should probably know what people need to be great, right?
Yeah.
And there are two buckets for this. There's individual kind of unique needs. And then fortunately, we have 14 needs that are universal. We have decades of research telling us that almost everyone in almost every type of organization around the world needs these 14 things to thrive at work. So the third step is then also pretty obvious. We need to get frequent feedback on how well we're meeting these needs. And then we need to respond to that feedback as quickly as possible with meaningful action. And that way, if we do these things little bits at a time, instead of getting a big bunch of feedback once a year, which is you could still do if you need to, but if you're going to do an annual survey, augment it with little bits of micro feedback on how well these needs are being met. And then that allows you to respond very quickly with just developing one or two new habits for responding to those needs, little bits at a time, so that actually you have behavior change over time.
And you say that these 14 needs are well researched. How many people do you think are aware of what these 14 needs are?
Well, I think anyone who's familiar with Gallup's work is familiar with most of them, because 12 of these needs are just explicitly stated. Yeah, exactly. The Q12. I've drawn out needs that are not explicit on the Q12, that they're implied, but I think they're so important that they need to be made explicit. Primarily the need of well-being. People need to be able to go to work and not be made sick by going to work. And that's not happening. In half of the workplaces in the United States, people are, it's toxic enough that people are, it's making them not well to go to work.
You think there's still a mindset of treating the workforce as resources rather than people?
Absolutely. I think, I'm a huge fan of the human resources professionals in the world, people operations professionals, but even that word, it's human resources, but they're not resources. These are people. So that's why I love the shift away from the term human resources to people operations, where it's like, hey, your job is to serve people, and bring out the best in them.
I think what's interesting listening to you when you talk about this sort of 3-step process, there's nothing crazy in that process, right? There's nothing that to me sounds outrageous. And yet, probably in organizations across the world, at boardrooms across the globe, there are still companies wrestling with this notion and wrestling with the friction that you talk about between short-term results today and long-term people investment in the future. And maybe even there's some sort of stakeholder blur still going on around in some organizations. We're still maybe operating in 1980s somewhere, where shareholder value is our primary focus, and that's all we're motivated by. Why do you think we've still got this kind of like such a prolific range of mentality and mindset in organizations, from what you see with all the companies that you work with? What's driving that range of different views?
Well, I think it ultimately comes down to brain chemistry, actually, and how habits are formed. But I think it's particularly pervasive whenever you have a publicly traded company, and in particular, depending on the quality or lack thereof of the board. Because in most publicly traded companies, the CEO is on a 90-day mandate, right? If they need to show profitability in 90 days, or their job is on the line, that creates a tremendous amount of pressure. Now, there are companies that have boards that are much more long-term thinking than that, and that pressure is removed. Southwest Airlines is a great example of that. They let Herb Kelleher for decades do whatever the heck he wanted because he made a ton of money, and he did it loving people and impacting them in a positive way. But I think, for any CEO who's in a publicly traded company, in his or her defense, that's a huge part of it. I mean, if your job is on the line in 90 days, you got to make some tough decisions. You got to make them fast. Often those decisions help them keep their job, help them be a CEO for 2 or 3 years, and then leave. And then the company sees the repercussions when they're gone, because you've created all these conditions where employees are not thriving. And I mean, this is not rocket science, Andy. You know,
I know.
if you fail to serve your employees and you neglect them, what's eventually going to happen is they will eventually fail to serve the customer. And when your company's failing to serve your customers, guess who's going to come in and do it for you? Your competitors,
Yeah.
right? So I mean, it's that's you see that a lot. But I think in every organization, what happens is there's this brain chemistry happening where, you know, what happens when we do something that is a short-term win, whether it's hitting a short-term monetary goal, even something as simple as checking off something on your to-do list, cleaning out your email inbox. What happens is you get this little hit of a neurotransmitter that's some variation of an opioid neurotransmitter, and it makes you feel good. And then when that starts to fade away, dopamine comes in and says, go do that again. It compels you to go do that again. And this is how habits are formed. This is kind of the basis of addiction and habits, that this brain chemistry is telling us, you want to feel good? Well, go do what you just did, right? Go do something else where you can immediately see that you won something, right? The problem is, as we all know from habit formation, most of the things that are really good for us don't feel good in the short term. They suck. There's some pain involved. But in the long term, you look back and say, wow, that was really worth the effort. Most of the things that are not good for us, to include, even in this discussion, like neglecting employees obviously is not good for us. But in the short term, it can feel really good to say, wow, look at how we made our numbers balance by eliminating 10% of our workforce. You know, that might feel good if you're just thinking on numbers, and you might get a short-term hit, and then 6 months later, you really regret, the impact that had on people's lives.
So how do we break the cycle? How are you breaking the cycle? How are you helping organizations break this cycle? Because I think it's pervasive. I mean, I think you'd have to be pretty hard pressed to really disagree with the message that you're communicating, with the message that Engage for Success is trying to sort of like
Right.
spread, and yet we still have this problem. We still have this issue.
Here's what I think the biggest issue is, and this is really what inspired the approach that we use and that I write about in Inspire Greatness, is that we're very impatient, I think, and we think, like, okay, yeah, we know, almost everyone knows that if there are performance issues in an organization, it's the managers that are the issue, right? It's not HR that's the problem. It's not usually the strategy that's the problem, although that could be in some cases, but in almost every instance, and it's not the employees necessarily. It's almost always the quality of the managers. And Gallup's research is very clear on this, that the number one factor predicting the success of your organization is the quality of your managers and the degree to which they create employee engagement. This is very clear. So what do? We say, well, we know managers are the issue. Well, they're broken and we need to fix them. So first of all, who wants to hear that message, right? If you get told, that you need fixing, you're not going to respond to that very well. And B, even if you do, how leadership development is normally done is it's a one-off project, maybe done once a year. It's a full day of training. And what happens? You get a bunch of people in a room. They hire someone like me or maybe you to come in. You give a day workshop. Everyone's inspired when they leave. They take pages of notes. And then what happens when they get back to the office on Monday? Not much, exactly. Right? Because all you've done is an information transfer for 6 hours. And there's no building of habits in that time. So this was actually the core insight that led to the approach that we use. Is I thought, well, you don't learn anything like that. Like, let's say I was coaching you on, did you play golf, Andy, or basketball?
Badly, badly.
So let's just use golf.
All sports bad. Yeah, let's
just use golf for an example. Let's say I watched you, I'm your golf coach, and I watch you take 10 swings. And then I say, Andy, I talked to you for 10 minutes about 15 things you need to fix. And I say, okay, go ahead, Andy, have at it. How effective is that going to be?
Yeah.
Nothing's going to change, right? But what if I said, Andy, I'm noticing that you're swinging a little bit too far back. And when you do that, your left elbow bends, and that's creating a ton of inconsistency. You're losing a ton of power. What I want you to do is shorten up your swing by about 30%. Make sure that left arm stays straight. Let's try 20 swings like that. You do 20 swings and you go, holy cow, this is amazing. I'm hitting it straight. It's going 15 yards farther. It's consistent. I say, great. Let's do 100 shots like that for the rest of this practice session. Let's get that into muscle memory. And I'll see you tomorrow. right? Now, what are the odds that that's going to stick? Significantly higher,
you're
right?
going to see improvement, right?
Right. And then we continue with that the next day, maybe, and then we add something else. We're doing the same thing with leadership development. So instead of doing a 1-day workshop, and it's okay to do a 1-day workshop to kick things off, but there needs to be follow-up. So what we recommend is that you look at, here's our process. It's so simple and logical. Look, if managers in organizations consistently meet the 14 universal needs people have for thriving, guess what you have? High levels of engagement, low levels of turnover, high levels of performance, period. Right? So, but you can't fix somebody, quote unquote. You can't get somebody who's not meeting any of these needs consistently to magically start meeting them in a week. Yep. Over a year, you certainly can. So what we recommend is you say, look, let's just focus on simple habits that are easy to start, easy to stick with, and build on that. So over the course of a year, people have gradually implemented new behaviors that become habits that stick for consistently meeting these 14 needs. So that's what I think is really at the core, is that it becomes overwhelming if we think I have all these things I have to do and I have to do them quickly. Then nothing changes. But if you say, what if you had permission to just change one thing and only change it by 5 or 10%? It's like if you want to run a marathon, you don't go out and start running 20 miles day one. You start off, with 2 or 3 and, you gradually build up. Right.
And is there a challenge here also in the provision of decent coaches? Because I would totally concur with you that a lot of leadership development stuff is wonderful, woo-woo, crowds chomping at the bit, people frothing at the mouth when they come out of these sessions if you've got it right, and they run back to work desperate to try things, and 2 things happen. One, they meet inertia below them with people not necessarily want to do stuff, which can really, really be difficult for people to kind of like, oh, I thought this was going to work immediately. And that little bit of resilience is required to keep going and practice, like you said, but also above them in that they run into these, have great ideas and really want to sort of make a difference. And the people above them going, what are you talking about? That's not what we do here. And we've got this frozen middle, bless them, who've got all this excitement and engagement, and they're just kind of like frozen between these 2 forces. So I guess, where am I going with it? I guess
you nailed it at the beginning. You nailed it.
The provision of coaches, I think.
Exactly. You nailed it, Andy. Like that's the shift that we need to continually make. And I think, one of the issues too is just talking about systemic issues is the things most important to running an organization aside from strategy, they all tend to get delegated to HR as a project. Yeah. So you have employee engagement. Some team in HR is handling that. Leadership development, the learning and development people in the HR department, they handle that. Performance management, we've got the performance management team, they handle that. They're in HR. None of these things should be a project delegated to HR. Now, HR is an absolutely essential and extremely valuable partner in all of these, but operations needs to own these. And I think performance management is the perfect example. And by the way, they all tend to be separate. When in reality, engagement, leadership development, and performance management are all so interconnected, and they have to be interconnected for them to work. That's one of the issues why they haven't worked over the last 20 years. We haven't seen an improvement in engagement in 20 years. And part of it is because these things are all separate, both by function and chronologically. So I think you're right on the money. In order for all of this to work in a way that is sustainable, operations need to see that by doing this is the core function for hitting our goals. For hitting big, inspiring goals, we need a performance management process that works and that is augmented by leadership development and measurement of employee engagement. And the heart of that is coaching. So here's performance management. What does it normally amount to? In most organizations, last I read, it's around 85% of organizations, it's an annual review. Yeah. Who likes that? I mean, I can just imagine your listeners right now. No one's raising their hand. No one likes it. Managers don't like it because it's like, oh, crap, it's the end of the year. I got to do this annual review. Here goes 2 weeks of my life. And the employees hate it because they're like, man, you don't know what I did 10 months ago. And you're judging me on what I did 10 months ago. I mean, come on. And that's all it is. It just becomes a judgment conversation. And if it's tied to pay and promotion, Now you create this competitive internal competition in your organization where people are backstabbing each other, trying to get on top of each other. When in reality, what performance management should be is really simple, right? Hey, let's set big goals that we're all excited about. Let's make sure they're cascaded down through the organization so that the most junior manager can say, hey, team members, let's look at this. Here's our team goal. How do you contribute to this? Like what goals do you want to set that would make you excited to come to work on Monday that helps you contribute to this team goal we have, which, by the way, is aligned to the C-suite goals, right? Now, let's co-create goals that you're excited about. It's going to make you excited for Monday morning. What KPIs do you think you need to make sure you're on track, right? How do we measure this? And then the manager's job at that point is to say, I'm not a manager. I'm a leader. I'm a coach. You've set the goal. You set the KPIs. And my job is to coach you, to help you win, right? And think of the shift in how meaningful it is now to be a manager. Instead of being the guy or the girl who's basically doing a bunch of extra admin stuff, babysitting people, and at the end of the year, you got to judge them all. No, now it's, holy cow, I get to wake up on Monday morning and go develop great human beings who are doing great work, help them to be happy and to thrive. Now work becomes meaningful, right? So you hit it right on the head. What we need is managers who see that the key to all of this is coaching. They need to be coaches, not judges of people. And as that starts to grow throughout an organization, that solves the issue you're talking about. Where if you have every leader throughout the organization is a coach, then when someone comes to me with an idea, I don't say yes or no. I say, well, tell me how you came up with that idea. Like,
Absolutely.
How are you going to measure whether your idea is right or wrong? Like, how do you plan to implement this? Right? Coaches ask questions, right?
Absolutely. And I think that is one of the challenges is training or coaching people to be great coaches, to ask questions, because we're so used to managing the tasks at that level, actually not stepping in and helping someone grow through making mistakes, or from having a praise conversation, God forbid. Hey, keep doing that. That was great. Let's have more of that. What more of those sorts of things can you do? Because the performance management bit, certainly in this country, is a large intake of breath that is accompanied with the conversation, because it's kind of like, oh, it's negative crap again.
Right.
Whereas it should be a continuous conversation about the good things and the things that perhaps could be improved. Right.
And it should be forward thinking. Performance
Yeah.
management tends to be a review of the past and a judgment of the past, whereas what it should be is, how do we learn from the past to make a better future? That's what performance managers should be, and that's what coaches do. Hey, tell me how you think that went. What went well? Like, what do you think you do better in the future so you can have more excitement and joy at work, and we can hit our goals and all have fun together, right?
I said this would be an incredibly quick 30 minutes, and it's proving to be that way, my friend. But if you have got an opportunity here to give advice to a whole bunch of senior leaders listening to this episode, who are probably hanging on every word, yes, I want this, Matt, but what have I got to do first? If people who want to make this shift at scale across their organization starting tomorrow, what's the first thing you would have them do?
The very first thing is you have to have time set aside on your calendar for coaching and developing people, developing your skills as a coach and practicing being a coach, coaching and developing people. Why? Because if it's not time that is set aside on your calendar, blocked off, it will never happen, right? Because it never fails, right? The things that are important but not urgent, they get moved to tomorrow, and then tomorrow you got to put out tons of fires. It gets moved to the next day. There has to be time, ideally as early in the morning as possible, to start taking micro actions to help be a better coach, learn to be a better coach, and practice coaching before you get sucked into the day and you lose the whole day, and then you never have a chance to do it.
And what a great start to anyone's day that would be, right? To make a difference in somebody's life, make them see something, make them feel a bit better, make them go on to perform in ways they didn't really imagine. That would be a tremendous start to the day for most humans out there, I'm sure, Matt. Listen, I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of this in 30 minutes, and yet so much rich stuff in there to sort of grab a hold of. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing these insights with us and your own experiences, because that's what really matters. Matt, if listeners do, and I'm sure they will, want to connect with you and get hold of the book and learn more about your work, where should they track you down, my friend?
Oh, easy. You can find me on LinkedIn. The website is just first name, last name, MATTTENNEY.com.
Brilliant. Matt, best of luck with all this work. Please keep fighting the good fight and helping more people kind of see this is not a choice. You can have both. You can have the best of both if we just make these shifts that you've talked about, and we'll all be in a better place. Everybody, that is all the time we have for today, unbelievably. Please don't forget to visit engageforsuccess.org to check out all the show notes and explore all the free employee engagement resources. And don't forget, you can also download any of the episodes from the past at your leisure. We will be back at the same time next week. I'm Andy Gorham, and thanks so much for listening to Engage for Success Radio.
Engage for Success Radio, raising the profile of employee engagement and shining a light on good practice for people who believe there's a better way to work.